today's episode of SSP Sidebar. All right, welcome back to SSP Sidebar. This episode is going to be all about campaign reporting. It is a critical piece to retaining our clients and follow up, retain, and grow. You ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So first things first, how frequently do you discuss, deliver, review campaign reports with a client?
Okay, you are coming in hot.
Yep.
So standard is monthly, but it's important to go back and think about what expectation did they set. Because usually they'll tell you if you ask, I want to see reports once a month, once every two, but then also make sure that they do know. You have to do your due diligence and share those metrics and make sure they're getting their eyes on them and you're telling the story. Sometimes I think about how many products are running. So let's say if they're running like station.com versus a holistic package of like 5 different products, in that case, you're probably going to see that advertiser a lot more often. You just have to kind of gauge it, use your gut.
Yeah. Okay. So if you think about what metrics are being reported on, I mean, obviously there's a variety of success measures that the client might have as KPIs, different metrics that we have access to. What campaign metrics do you think of when you think about campaign reporting?
Well, if we start with TV, typically we'd share post logs and then a lot of details around reach and frequency. From there, like the impressions delivered. So we look at all of that together and then we're prepared to kind of like tell that story.
So will you give a post log report directly to the client?
No. Actually, no. And oftentimes we do see sellers do that, and it can just be a lot for that advertiser to sift through and try to understand that data on their own. However, we do use that information. It's very important to dive into that to tell your story. So, for example, we could use that to determine if we need to shift reach and frequency, if we need to enhance that. A lot of times we use that to tell the story and think about the KPIs they set for themselves and want us to reach and accomplish with our products. So we have to consider all those things, but just handing over those post logs and say, hey, here you go. Here's what's happening. That can be a fast cancel. So we have to be careful with that.
Well, and do you remember when we used to just like attach a report to an email and send it, and then we're like, boom, reporting done for the month?
Guilty.
I know. And so we did exactly what you just said. We forced them to have to sift through the data if they even chose to. And even worse, we put them in a position to create their own interpretation of what that data meant. Instead of getting ahead of it, like you said, and being able to tell the story and kind of control the message a little bit ourselves.
Exactly, yeah. We have that opportunity to give them what they've asked for. Don't make them do the work. So we talked about TV. Digital, what metrics would you share?
Yeah, so we have our dashboard, obviously, Tap Analytics, and the most straightforward is when it comes to impressions and clicks. But it's so important to remember that impressions and clicks are just like a tiny part of the story to tell there. And it kind of takes me back to that study that we've referenced so many times where like if a consumer sees an online display ad that interests them, only a third of those people interested are going to click on it. So if a click is all you're measuring or reporting on, it's just not going to get you very far. So we also need to be looking at each creative that's running and each tactic that's running and really dig into when and where and how their potential customers are actually responding. Really giving ourselves that time and that data and that ammunition to tell the story that we need to tell.
Yeah, that's important. What about outside data? Because we talk about what we have to share, but I think there is an extension of that. Like, for example, we have Google Analytics.
Yep.
It's 2021. Every business should have Google Analytics.
Right.
And as trusted advisors, we need to help them, 1, get it if they don't. 2, help them give us access. So that way they can see on their own the contributions that their marketing's having to their overall website traffic. And that really is a telling story. And you can also start to see some overlap there in the lifts when you're bringing a couple of products together.
Yep.
So that's important. It's important for our teams as well to be able to understand that data and apply the feedback from their analytics to their campaigns.
Yeah. And I love when an advertiser is even only running TV and we want to look at their Google Analytics and they're like, well, what is the connection there? And kind of helping them realize, well, you will see a spike in website traffic and we want to watch and see what that looks like for you in particular when your TV campaign runs.
Yeah.
And then the other data set, I would say, so you have what we have access to, and then we have the outside data like you're talking about with Google Analytics or even Google My Business. There's also a third data set, and that's whatever the client can bring to the table. And so going back to setting expectations early and gaining their agreement to really partner with us on this, what can they show us? Do they have that data on conversions or leads driven by within that month? Are they willing to share revenue data and progress towards those growth objectives that we're working on together?
I think that really tells the full story.
Yeah.
If we're able to collect that and then layer on what we do with our data. So just like we talked about with the TV data that we collect from that and that reporting, and then also the digital metrics, we can look at those pieces. But now we're rolling into reporting. So we have to be strategic in how we position that story. Mm-hmm. And so if we're able to look at those details and interpret it, we have to make sure we bring the business's customer into that conversation as well. So let's take a look at what that can sound like.
Okay.
How you discuss those reports can make or break the client's excitement, belief, and engagement in the campaign and partnership. Let's visit the most important piece of effective campaign reporting. It is easy to share numbers, but we also want to interpret the numbers ourselves so we don't leave it up to the client to make their own interpretation. Let's talk about how you can tell a story with numbers. Say a campaign delivered 150,000 display impressions and reached 85,000 people with a 2.6 frequency with a TV schedule. Instead of saying just that to our client, we can help them visualize a customer seeing that display ad, watching that commercial, and potentially doing business with them. We could say something like, I am excited to share with you that your unique message about complimentary design services was presented 150,000 times to women 35 to 54 while they browsed the internet. 85,000 women 35 to 54 were able to see that message 2.6 times each while watching TV all last month. That's a lot of people who will now think of your furniture store and your complimentary design services instead of your competitors when they are ready to update their homes. So hopefully you can hear the difference between just sharing the data and telling a story. And next time you're preparing to have a reporting conversation, we challenge you to tell the story it represents.
So as a trainer, I love to watch how our sellers start to understand how we position our reporting this way.
Yeah.
And they're kind of like, how have I not done it this way before? And really just repositioned it in a completely different way than advertisers are used to receiving data from their advertising campaigns. It's cool.
Yeah, totally. And if you think about kind of the mindset that a lot of people accidentally get into when you're at this point in the campaign is they start to look at campaign data and performance as being about us and being about our products. And I mean, I guess really it is about us at this point, right?
Right.
No, it's about the business's customers. And so if we can help our account executives shift the way that they think about campaign data, it's not about us. It's not about our products. It's about how potential customers are responding to certain targeting techniques, to certain creative messaging, to certain offers, to certain brands. And that mind shift can make a really big difference.
Yeah, I agree. And think about it. Most business owners, they are used to seeing clicks and impressions. Mm-hmm. And so when you start to position it in terms of how their potential customers are interacting with their messages, how they're responding to them.
Yes.
Again, really just bringing in that customer language over and over again. It is a game changer. They hear it differently.
Yep. It's even as simple as sometimes people will be like, well, I'm just going to call and ask them, like, how did it work for you last month? I just want to say, just switch it and ask, hey, how did customers respond to that last month? And it's just such a quick shift in how you do that. Okay, so if you are putting together reporting numbers, you're creating the story, right? How specifically will you provide this to the client? How are you going to show the numbers in the story?
Pretty specifically, to be honest. So, for example, I will do a full-on retention deck. And so,
what is a retention deck?
Retention deck is like, think about you have a presentation deck, right? You have that. Now, your retention deck is simply telling the story of that campaign, but we get to control that. And not in a way where we want to hoard that information. It's we have listened to what they want to see and hear. We understand their success metrics. So that's what we're going to share.
Okay. All right. So what do you include in this deck?
I like to start with maybe that first slide will have exactly like their goals, their growth opportunity, how they measure success and what that looks like for them. The next one could be a screenshot. You know, people love to see their ads out there. You know, if they're running a banner ad, they might not see them all the time. So to get to see that fresh creative, and that is what their customers are seeing out there when they're actively looking for their products. So maybe a couple of screenshots here and there, and then we dive into the data. And rather than just pulling like a wide orbit report and plugging that in or exporting something straight from TAP, I will screenshot and I will clip and snip and I will insert that story of what they kind of set the expectation with us, what they wanted to see. So that way, it's not them just having to sift through a lot of details and data that doesn't make sense to them. It's what they've asked of us.
Yeah. Okay.
But it is a full-on PowerPoint deck. And when I say that, it literally could be 3 slides. I think you have to kind of gauge, you know, how big is this investment? Is this one product? And our AEs do a good job with that.
Yeah. So will you include in the deck, will you include details about any sort of recommended changes or anything like that? Or do you simply reserve that for the conversation?
Yeah. And that's not every time at all.
Okay.
And so if we think about our 2-4 sale process, it's when it makes sense. But if it does, you know, next steps might be to be more aggressive with the specific focus area. Next steps might be here's a pixel that we want you to install, so we can be more aggressive with your tangible conversion tracking.
Okay.
So it's not every time, but I'm glad you brought that up because it is important for that follow-up piece and continue to pour energy and structure into this retention step, even in that deck.
Yeah. Okay. So I think it's important to kind of go back to a conversation that we had in a previous episode about how clients will kind of mirror the energy that we come in with. Reporting is such a big part of that. And so many people are just nervous for these reporting conversations.
Yeah.
And I do think that a lot of what we've talked about with setting the right expectations up front, how you can position the data, being prepared when you go in, a lot of that stuff is going to help with that confidence right off the bat. But also just being aware that if you go in with anxious, nervous, scared energy, the client is going to absorb that and mirror it back to you. So be confident in what we're taking in. Understand the story that you're telling and own it and run with it.
Yeah.
It can make a big difference.
So mirroring of the energy, that goes a long way, but that can also be the same when it comes to the numbers. So if you walk in and say, hey, it's great to see you. Here's some fresh donuts. And you got 85,000 TV impressions and 150,000 impressions on your banner ads. See you in 3 months. You know, so how can you take? Can you take that, Renee? Take that information there, and what can it sound like to adjust the way we share campaign reports and the story with an advertiser?
So so to give this example, you just said, what did you say? 85,000
TV impressions.
Okay. And 100,000 banner impressions. Is that what you said? Okay. So I would shift that. So it's not about the impressions. It's not about what we delivered or what we served through the ad server. It's about what happened for their business. And so really adding that what's in it for them, which is their customers. So I would do something like, hey, in the last 30 days in our partnership and our efforts to help work you towards this growth opportunity of an additional X per month, there were 85,000 opportunities for potential customers to see your unique message of whatever that USP is on their television, and 100,000 opportunities for them to see that message in their banner ads on their computers when they're actively searching for your products and services.
Wow, it's so different.
Yeah, and then you can transition into the data too, right? So from our end, I can tell you that 300 of those people clicked directly through that ad, went to your website to learn more. Let's take a look at your data and see what they did from your perspective. But again, it's all about what the customer did, what the customer experienced.
It does really make that much of a difference because it sounds so different. And I think it's important for us to know it does take practice because it's a huge transition to really position reporting this way.
Yeah.
So when we work with our AEs, do it over and over again, and it'll start to stick.
Practice, practice, practice.
Right. Practice, practice, practice.
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 So for reporting,
Okay.
I think that's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
What?
Oh, goodness.